Welcome to another episode of the Launch Lab podcast. I am with our guest, Mr. Professor, I would say, Stefan Haefliger. Professor, thank you very much for being here. You are professor at Bayes Business School, professor of strategic and innovation management. Can you please first introduce yourself for our audience?
Thank you so much for having me, Mukhtasar. A great pleasure to be at the Launch Lab again. I'm a professor of strategy and innovation, so it's the overlap of technology, the development of new technology, and what's its strategic relevance for firm survival, but also the workplace in general. I study business models, I study information systems, and usually with a focus on what technology does to our workplace.
And then I guess you are the perfect fit for our Launch Lab podcast, isn't it? Before diving to a more exciting business tech part of our discussion, you are multilingual. You speak several languages, French, German, Italian. That's just something that caught my attention. I do unfortunately just speak French, but how this skill set has benefited you in a business sense? How does speaking many languages help in business, or what's your experience on that?
I'm Swiss originally, so originally I grew up with Swiss German, strong dialect of German, and then we learned proper German in school when we learned to write, and then next comes French, and then afterwards you have a choice between English or Italian. I did both, and I love both, and it's a pleasure to speak languages, but I suggest that we don't look at languages so much as a tool in order to get stuff, but as a sense of identity and a feeling at home in multiple places. While it is helpful, obviously, to get a job and to be easily blending into different business environments, it's also useful to speak languages that are smaller. And I wouldn't necessarily rush to a specific language just because it is useful.
And where would you consider to be home then?
Well, at the moment, home is London, and it's been for 10 years. And yes, I miss the mountains and the lakes.
Without any delay, let's shift gear and focus on strategic management and business model. What is strategic management, Professor?
So, in general, strategic management is the science of survival of companies. And yes, there are many high-flying concepts around strategic advantage and outperformance, but fundamentally it's about staying alive and staying in business. That's what a company needs to do. And as we know, it takes 5 years for an organization to learn anything. So if you don't make it to 5 years, you're sort of not really in the game yet. So it's all about how to actually survive and then sustain and create a long-term future for everyone who's involved with the organization.
You also work on business models. What is the difference between theoretical business models, the one you taught at Bayes Business School, and the practical side of it, where you can see application at the Launch Lab? Where would you see the difference?
So business models are both theoretical and practical. They're theoretically, they're part of strategy, and they're the part of firm survival that is specifically concerned with the interface to the customer. Practically speaking, business models are a helpful tool to play around with how to link to customers, identify customers, decide which customer pays, which one gets something for free, in a way that is experimental without betting the entire company. So the tool, being a model, allows you to model things as in a sandbox, and to think through very complex situations with a simple set of tools that is the interface to the customer. So it's a very practical tool to play and find out things before making very costly mistakes.
I wouldn't say it's my critiques, but if I was playing devil's advocate, I would say that some of the best business lessons that anyone can learn is just like trying stuff. So where does the academic part benefit? In some sense, let me rephrase it. what's the difference between someone who tried 10 business, failed 9 times and is currently on to 1, and the other person who actually has done the same, but he has followed the more academic path? Because I haven't done a business school, I've done a law school, and for me it's still kind of a mystery, like what do you actually learn in a business school that you can't learn in real life?
Fantastic question. The answer is nothing. I mean, you can learn everything in real life. It's just that, the science of management is something between art and science. It's both building on experience, and it gives tools, ideally helpful tools, ideally tools that you learn from elsewhere because others have done it successfully, that you more quickly apply it and build on what others have done successfully. So in the business model example, it's a simplification of an extremely complex business reality to say there are only 4 types of business models. And with these 4 types, you have a certain template, and you can build on these templates and experiment in more targeted ways. The same is true for the way you use technology, specifically digital technology, to build the customer interface.
Okay, so I love your answer, Professor. You said that absolutely nothing. And again, I haven't done a business school, so it's kind of unfair for me to come out criticizing business school without having done one. But isn't it that the most successful entrepreneurs haven't done a business school? And most, the old saying says, even a drug dealer, by operating a street shop, learn more in some instant than whatever postgrad student who spent his life studying on books. What I'm struggling really to understand the value of, I don't doubt the value of your teaching, but how does it practically help a startup or a founder? How does it, teaching strategic management and innovation, gives me a hedge compared to all of my other competitors?
So fundamentally, you're right in questioning that, and it's something that every entrepreneur should question. And I say that also because I want to encourage entrepreneurs to be experimental and learn in the market with customers in a practical sense. Because a lot of what universities do and what we do at business schools is understand the history of successful organizations and understand what drove managers, what drove technologists, what's the background of how an innovation comes about. And that's always retrospective. And we have this saying that predictions are very tricky, specifically about the future, because it's very hard to understand and to predict. So we need to experiment. But an informed way of experimenting is to learn from past mistakes and to build on ways to navigate an extremely complex and ambiguous world. And I think the tools we develop, hopefully, will actually accelerate our learning and help us navigate this complexity. And the business model tool is exactly one of these tools.
To learn from what happened in the past.
And to classify an extremely complex world, let's take the world of platform strategy. Today, everyone in strategy talks about platforms and ecosystems. So we need to, a platform can be anything from a wall socket in a technological vocabulary, it's just a standard, all the way to a complex business model that has multiple stakeholders and multiple customers interacting, usually in a digital setting. And to understand this setting means understanding the interfaces with the different customers, different stakeholders, and to plug in our own work and our own services in a meaningful way.
Let's focus a bit more on then the innovation part of your work. We haven't yet, but you mentioned on your profile open innovation, information system and regulation. I understand IT, well, I have a base understanding of the basics of IT, but how does it relate to what is open innovation, and how do you combine this into what you just described, which is a classification of past event and past companies?
Right. We just talked about platforms, and platforms have been becoming so much more powerful and ubiquitous because of the presence of the internet, first of all, and because of the ability to plug in all kinds of digital devices into the internet and to have an exchange of information that is virtually free of cost. With this infrastructure, that is the current setup of the internet and the information technology, we have an ability to relate and send data to a number of mind-blowing places, people and machines. And to sort through this is to understand first, what are some of the options that we have? What is the infrastructure that we can build on virtually for free? And then where's the knowledge that we have, let's say as a company or as a startup, adding value? And open innovation is the fundamental insight that we don't need to invent everything ourselves that we use and sell. We can actually reuse other people's inventions, we can build on other people's inventions, and we can also, in the classic open innovation sense, that is the market for technologies, if we have a patent, we can also license out the patent to others that will use it. Some big companies that sit on a lot of patents make most of their money from royalty fees. So open innovation comes from that tradition, knowing that a lot of intellectual property can cross company boundaries at any time, and there are markets out there for knowledge. Now for startups, that's a bit of an interesting question because many startups don't have patents yet. They have ideas, they have early stage, maybe trademarks, they're maybe about to patent something. So they need to think very carefully what to protect and what to let go. And that decision is crucial. So you have some IP that will be making or breaking your value as a company. That obviously you're not giving away for free. And you have other technology that you need for this to run, say an operating system on a device that you build on. That's going to be something that you take for free because it's already available. You don't need to reinvent the wheel there. So that's from the innovation side. Now there's an additional question that becomes interesting for startups, which is open strategy. And open strategy means what do you open up in your decision-making process? Whereas most big companies are highly averse at opening anything, maybe informally, but rarely formally. Startups are different. They are in a network of advisors, stakeholders, investors who are actively taking part in their business decisions. And the classic term pivoting often means that someone advised you to do something quite different than what you had in mind. And this can be a great thing. And it can mean survival and sustainability. But that influence that comes from the outside is the openness. And you want to be open in very strategic ways.
So would you say that your work does not... A startup is not the best use case for strategic management and innovation, and that your work would be more tailored for maybe medium or big corporations?
I wouldn't generalize this because the business model is a very important tool for startups because they can build on and use the model to navigate a very dynamic market environment. The tool helps you set up, identify the correct customers, add different customer groups, and understand the mechanisms that play between the customer groups, such as network effects. So while the model itself helps also modeling big companies and their changes, it's a helpful tool for startups.
Now, have you personally embarked on any entrepreneurial journey or startup?
So I've run an art company for many years in the fine arts space in Switzerland. And given that that market is very difficult to establish a permanent income stream, it is a permanently entrepreneurial type of organization. And we set up a shareholder company, and that was ultimately what we called a corporate sculpture. So it was a very unusual type of startup because it was in fine arts and it was made up of artists who produced as an artwork a company and projects within that company. So it's a very special experience, but nevertheless it is a startup type of environment.
Oh, sorry, can you just precise what kind of use case for the fine art are you referring to? Like what kind of product were you selling?
Well, all kinds of artwork, from performances to large-scale installations to also works that you can hang on the wall. Because we knew that a lot of the fine arts industry is still in oil. Oil paintings are very, very valuable. So is photography, and so is slowly video. But we knew that doing performances is something that is fleeting and escaping, and it's there and then it's gone. So the documentation of these performances became images that you could hang on the wall that we would certify as share certificates of the company. So by owning a share certificate, you would support and own the future of the art company and thus invest in the future of the artwork that we would produce. Thus the twist to the shareholder company that is the artwork itself.
So basically the idea that you were allowing people to be a shareholder in a company, and not only do you get a certificate saying that you're a shareholder, but a piece of art.
Which is one and the same object, yes.
So the piece of art would act as a legal document at the same time as an actual piece of art.
That's correct.
And your platform would allow to do that, to connect those companies.
It's only one company. That's us. That was our company. The shareholder
So
company.
it's kind of a NFT before being an NFT, right?
Yes. So we didn't go into the NFT because it wasn't there at the time that we ran this. But we had very much the idea that the certification of a specific documentation would be an authentication and convey the authorship of us as artists. So in that way, very similar.
It was before you started teaching, right?
That's right.
How much would you say that your experience as a founder has shaped?
I wasn't actually the founder. I was the chairman for a while, and we were running it as a team of artists. So it has definitely shaped my understanding of organizations, and also in a way, I think the playfulness that organizations should allow us to reflect life and what we do. And organizations are constituted by the way we work, right? And it's now also my work in research to understand better how technology constitutes the organization. We constantly send messages, we have streams of knowledge flows, and these ways of communicating using devices, using protocols, are constituting the very organizational processes that we then call company. So this link is important to understand, I think, in my research and in the way we conceptualize technology.
Sorry, can you? Sorry, I've just lost you on. Can you just rephrase the last bit?
Absolutely. So I'm intrigued by how we think about technology. Oftentimes we think about technology as a black box. It's a device, it's a piece of software, it's a thing we ship around. Yes, to all that. And technology creates new relationships. When I send you a message, that message contains maybe some information, maybe a question. It establishes a link between us. And fundamentally, any information technology, certainly all of the digital technologies we use, have both of that. They are a device, a software and a hardware, and they have a relational component. They link human beings and they link humans to machines. And these are the very processes that we organize as a company. These are the communication flows, the flows of resources, the flows of services to customers and so forth. So I would argue that we need to understand those things together. We need to understand what the technology does, specifically if we change it, and what the organization actually wants to do. And these things are related very, very closely.
What's the difference, or because for me, my understanding from where we are in the discussion is kind of you see entrepreneurship and the companies as a science, as something to study, something to put on a box and make some models. Yet you are yourself an entrepreneur. You were chairman of this company, and you can realize that maybe on the other end of the spectrum, the founder, the one who is actually doing the company, he's like miles away of all of those considerations. The only thing he's caring about is, okay, money out, money in, money out, money in. How would you link those two? Because you see what I mean, like the theoretical part, because it's very theoretical, but most people, they start a company making either because they are passionate or just want to make money. Rare are the people who actually spend time on the processes. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think there are many ways in thinking about this kind of this paradox, as it were. On the on one end there's a passion and then an immediate running and the making and the surviving, but with the cash flow and the making the next quarter, etc. And then the managers and founders themselves step back and think more about what's the point? Why am I doing this? What's the purpose of that whole enterprise? If it's just money, that can be fine for a while, but it tends to be not enough because talent wants to join that group of people because they're inspired by something that has usually a purpose that is on top of making money. So there is a phase in the growth and in the acquisition of talent that needs this stepping back and asking, what are we really about? And at the same time, many of us or many managers in general go back to the business school. And they want to be inspired again and they want to have these conversations and learn and take a course on X, Y, Z and then bring that back into the enterprise. And that back and forth is what stimulates us as scholars to understand what's really happening in the market, in companies, and hopefully stimulates them back to think more broadly about how they are operating and what they could improve.
I find it interesting when you talked about why people were coming to business school. Can you elaborate a bit on that? Why do people go on business school, like especially when you are like those high-level executive or just maybe a founder who found an exit? Why would those, from your experience, type of people who kind of like are already successful on their own way, go back to business school?
So one reason is that you can argue founders are a small minority in the entire workforce of managers. And I want to talk both about founders and about the other managers. So managers on a career, they may be expert in their specific discipline. They may have a legal background, they may have an engineering background. And at some point they enter the group of, let's say, top-level executives that need to debate everything about the company, from finance to logistics to strategy to marketing. And oftentimes we lack an understanding of everything. So the business school does that. A classic MBA program would help you understand a broad set of topics that are usually defining all the areas of business. So that's one thing. For a career to move up and to have more broad and more strategic conversations, it helps to have this exchange with others. And that's not just from the faculty because I know better. In fact, it's more from the network and the cohort of other participants and other managers in the classroom that this exchange gets really exciting. And then founders are a very specific subset of this group because they have ventured out and they did something very special that they founded it themselves. And they are in a way themselves in a situation where they may want to branch out or find out more about other markets, other geographies, other industries, and repeat or grow. And then again, they find a community at a business school who share their passion and their interest, and they may learn. So it's a lot about navigating these conversations because it's ambiguous. There is no right and wrong answer. There's some research, and the research is always up for debate, right? I may have found a model. I may have found some ideas about business models, and I present it in class, and then they rip it apart, and then they debate, and they say that's not true. And that's the learning journey, right? Not because I would know the right answer.
So you would say that people usually goes back to business school because they are looking for a different community or a bigger community, or it's mainly the community side more than the scientific looking for knowledge is more?
It's the mix of both. If you have one and not the other, it's not going to work. If you have only the community without the fresh research and the new knowledge, the community gets a bit stale. And then you go to a business school that actually has that type of research. And the other way around is true too. If you are without connection to the market and without students who actually live these problems and these challenges in their working lives, the academia becomes, at least in business and management, a bit dry as well.
Have you had to advise startups?
Well, I had the opportunity to work with some startups in the past, and it's often around understanding, being kind of a conversation partner and not having a right or wrong answer from our research.
I don't understand when you mean that. Like you have worked with startup, right?
Yes.
And what were kind of the practical, if you had to sum up like kind of the main value that strategic management and innovation could add to the startup, what would it be?
It's a kind of what I started out with. The most useful example that I had in my experience is the business model zoo. The idea that the toolbox helps us think through options before we implement them. And that kind of advice is a setting where startups think about their next step and their next development stage before they actually do it. And in startups, there's this specific situation that it's often a selection of ends with the means at hand. So the idea of effectuation, right? So that you are actually building a next step because you already do something well. And I like the example of the Swiss software company that becomes a banking software company because their first customer is a bank. Not because they wanted to go into banking, but they had a software that worked, and because their first client is a bank, it's quite likely that their second client will also be a bank because they understand their problems, the customer's problems better, and they speak to the kind of people that have these different challenges, and that could define the evolution of that specific startup.
But I understand perfectly the example of the Swiss company who had the first bank as a customer, but how does it relate to, I'm sorry, I'm like, just because it's a bit, I wouldn't say theoretical, but it's like, I find it fascinating. It's just, I just find it that it's different the way you approach things, because it's very, like, you come from a very kind of grid level approach. That's my feeling, like, the way you approach things is more like, you have this kind of like mathematical assumptions, and you have this grid within which you approach the whole system, and then every move needs to be coordinated to a previous sets of pattern. And it's very interesting the way you approach, because you essentially are in the science of entrepreneurship, I would say, because you are like more trying to find common ground on all of those. But most of the founders that we interviewed, it was very different, because their approach was not coming from bottom to down, but more, okay, basically, I'm a normal person. I see a problem. How can I make money out of it? So it's like more coming up. So that's why I found your approach very different, very academic.
That's why I'm not meeting you as a founder, but actually in my role as a scholar, right? I'm coming from a theory that drives our scientific endeavor. So we're going to the field to understand what companies do and what are patterns of success, for example.
But for who? Like, is it for government? Is it for public institution? Is it for who would benefit the most from this?
Great question. I wish I could give you a simple answer. I would hope that the most useful audience, the audience that finds it most useful, are managers who run big companies that help them understand how to sustain and how to keep working and how to succeed in their mission and their goals.
Because for me, if you take a step back, the value you bring by understanding the science of entrepreneurship would be basically understanding the economics behind, isn't it? And I think that I would assume that it's more, politicians would be more inclined to use your research, or public institutions, or like, you see what I mean, who are trying to drive the economic force in one direction or another. Yeah, exactly. So why did you choose senior management instead of like public administration as your first answer? You said that basically. So
yes, so because in understanding how organizations innovate and survive, it is my first interest to help the organizations themselves. And it's a second thought of thinking what policy implications could follow from that. I don't find that uninteresting, but it's definitely a second thought. The first one is for the organizations themselves, how to improve the environment of work, how to support management in creating a workplace where talent actually wants to be and stay. get attracted to and share the mission and so forth.
If you were to give advice to a early stage startup, let's say to a Launch Lab members just starting his entrepreneurial journey, what would it be?
I thought about this, and I think the first thing is it comes from this idea of open strategy, to listen carefully. You have many people telling you what to do, but only some are going to have the kind of information that will be truly valuable and change your path. So I think it's the skill of listening is the most important one, and to see, first of all, what is it that you bring to the table as a startup that is the most valuable service or product that you can produce, and then to find the right advisors that will actually take it to the next level, because it's always clear that we cannot do things alone in the complexity of our environment today, but to actually connect to the right kind of advisors and to listen to the advice that is most valuable.
And about listening, everyone listens, isn't it? I'm listening to you, you're listening to me. What do you mean by listening?
I usually challenge students to an exercise in listening, and I use it in every class that I run, in every discussion group. The big thing is to listen on 3 levels. To listen what you're actually saying, to listening what comes across when you're saying it, and to listen to what it triggers in me when I listen to you. And these 3 things can be completely different things. And it's very challenging to do these things at the same time, and takes a lot of practice. But I believe when there's an alignment, and when I hear you coherently and it makes sense, it can make sense on multiple levels. And I think that's a training we can do to listen. And that's not something that we would usually study at the business school, but it's something quite general and quite broad, but I think a business skill that is underestimated.
So you'd say that the most practical business skill is actually not taught in business school.
Exactly.
On this wonderful note, we're going to wrap up. Thank you very much for being here. Professor, how can people find you?
On many networks. I'm on Twitter at the moment, I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm obviously at Base Business School, and come visit us there.
Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you very much, Professor, for being here with us. On that, I look forward to see you next. Cheers.